A cowboy saves a lost Apache woman in the forest, never knowing she carried the cure for his heart. Elias Mercer lived where the land seemed to stretch forever, where the sky felt so wide it could swallow a man whole. His small wooden cabin sat at the edge of a thick pine forest in northern Arizona, a place where the wind whispered through the trees like quiet voices from another world. Most people in the nearby town said Elias chose this lonely life, but the truth was that loneliness had chosen him first. Years ago, Elias had been different. He had once been known as a man with an easy smile and a loud laugh. He used to ride into town with friends, trade stories at the general store, and stay late at the small cafe just to hear the sound of other people talking. But life has a way of changing a person in ways they never expect. When illness took his wife, the light inside him faded like a fire left in the rain. After that, the open land became his shelter, and silence became his closest companion. Every morning, Elias rose before the sun. He would step outside his cabin and breathe in the cold, clean air that smelled of pine and earth. His horse, a strong brown mare named Willow, would wait near the fence, already awake, already patient. Elias found comfort in routines. He fed Willow, checked the small herd of cattle that grazed nearby, and made sure the fences still stood strong against the wild world beyond. The forest always stood there, quiet and watchful. Elias did not fear it, but he respected it. He knew its paths, its streams, and the places where the ground softened after rain. Still, he felt that the forest held secrets he would never fully understand. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, it felt as if the trees were speaking to each other in a language older than time. That evening began like any other. The sun was low, painting the sky in shades of gold and soft red. Elias noticed one of his cattle had wandered toward the tree line. He sighed, grabbed his hat, and mounted Willow. He did not rush. He had learned that the land moved at its own pace, and so should he. As he rode closer to the forest, the air grew cooler. Shadows stretched across the ground like long, thin fingers. The sounds of the open plains faded, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds settling in for the night. Elias guided Willow between the first rows of trees, scanning the ground for signs of the missing animal. His thoughts drifted, as they often did, back to memories of his wife. He remembered the way she used to stand at the cabin door, waving as he rode out each morning. He remembered her laugh, light and warm like sunlight on water. A soft sound broke through his thoughts. At first he thought it was the wind, but then he heard it again. It was faint, almost like a whisper, but it carried something else with it, a note of fear, a note of pain. Elias pulled Willow to a stop. He leaned forward in the saddle, listening. The forest held still, as if it too was paying attention. The sound came once more, a weak cry drifting between the trees. His heart began to beat faster. Elias slid off his horse and tied the reins to a low branch. He moved carefully, stepping over roots and fallen leaves, following the sound. The deeper he went, the thicker the forest became. The light from the setting sun struggled to reach the ground. Shadows wrapped around him, but Elias did not turn back. Something inside him told him that whoever made that sound needed help. He pushed past a line of bushes and stopped. There, sitting on a fallen log, was a young woman. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders. Her clothes were torn and dirty from the forest floor. One of her hands pressed against her side, and her face was pale with exhaustion. She looked up when she saw him. Her eyes widened, filled with caution and uncertainty. Elias raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. His voice was calm, soft, like he was speaking to a frightened animal. "I won't hurt you," he said. "You're safe." The woman did not answer. She studied him closely, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. The forest around them felt heavy with silence. After a moment she spoke. Her voice was quiet, weak from thirst and tiredness. "I'm lost," she said. Elias nodded. "You've been out here a while, haven't you?" She hesitated, then nodded. 2 days, maybe more." Elias felt a tightness in his chest. The forest could be kind, but it could also be unforgiving. No one should face it alone for that long. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small water flask. He held it out slowly. "Here, drink." She watched him for a moment longer, then took the flask. She drank carefully, as if afraid the water might disappear if she rushed. "My name is Elias," he said once she lowered the flask. She swallowed and looked at him again. "Nayland." The name felt gentle in the air between them. Elias noticed the way she winced when she shifted her weight. "You're hurt." Nayland glanced down at her side. I slipped near the river, the rocks were wet. Elias nodded. He knew that river well. It was beautiful but dangerous if you didn't watch your step. You can't stay out here tonight, he said. It'll get cold. She looked around, uncertainty written on her face. I don't know where to go. You can come to my cabin, Elias said. It's not far. Nayland studied him again. Her eyes moved from his face to the horse waiting behind him, then back to his eyes. She seemed to weigh her choices carefully. Finally, she nodded. Elias offered his arm to help her stand. She hesitated, then took it. Her grip was light but steady. The walk back was slow. Elias kept his steps easy, matching her pace. The forest seemed less silent now, filled with small sounds of night settling in. Crickets began their song, and an owl called from somewhere above. When they reached Willow, Elias helped Nayland onto the saddle. He walked beside the horse, guiding it gently through the trees. The cabin lights glowed warmly in the distance when they emerged from the forest. It was a small place, but it stood strong against the wide world around it. Inside, Elias lit a lantern and helped Nayland sit near the table. He brought out a clean cloth and some water. I'll help clean that scrape, he said. She nodded. As he worked, Elias noticed how carefully she watched his hands, how her shoulders slowly relaxed as she realized he truly meant no harm. When he finished, he poured her a cup of warm tea made from herbs he kept on the shelf. It's not much, he said, but it'll help you rest. Nayland held the cup between her hands, breathing in the steam. Thank you, she said softly. Elias sat across from her. The cabin felt different with another person inside. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of something new. Outside, the wind brushed against the walls of the cabin, and the forest stood tall and quiet. Neither of them knew it yet, but this small moment, this meeting in the fading light, was the beginning of a path neither had planned to walk. And for the first time in a long while, Elias felt something stir inside his chest. Not pain, not loss. Hope. Morning light slipped gently through the small cabin window, painting soft lines across the wooden floor. Elias had been awake for a while, sitting quietly at the small table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He listened to the calm sounds of the land outside, the birds calling to each other, the wind moving through the trees like a slow, steady breath. Across the room, Nayland rested on the narrow bed near the wall. She had fallen asleep not long after finishing her tea the night before. Elias had placed a clean blanket over her and stepped back, unsure of where to sit or what to do with himself. It had been a long time since he had shared his space with anyone. Even the simple sound of another person breathing in the room felt strange and new. He watched as she slowly stirred. Her eyes opened, and for a moment she looked confused, as if trying to remember where she was. Then her gaze met his. Good morning, Elias said softly. Nayland pushed herself up a little, wincing slightly before finding a comfortable position. Good morning, she replied, her voice still quiet with sleep. Elias stood and poured fresh water into a small pot, setting it on the stove. I'll make something warm to eat, he said. It's not much, but it should help you get your strength back. She nodded, watching him move around the small kitchen space. Everything he owned seemed simple and worn, but clean and carefully kept. The shelves held a few tin cups, a stack of plates, and jars of dried food and herbs. The walls carried the soft scent of wood and smoke. As he cooked, Nayland slowly stood and walked toward the window. She looked outside, her eyes taking in the open land and the edge of the forest where the trees stood tall and still. It's quiet here, she said. Elias smiled faintly. That's what I like about it. She turned to him. Don't you ever feel lonely? The question caught him off guard. He stirred the pan a little longer than needed before answering. Sometimes, he admitted, but the land keeps me busy. Nayland nodded as if she understood more than his words said. They sat at the table and ate together. The food was simple but warm and filling. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It felt like a space where both of them could breathe. After breakfast, Elias grabbed his coat. I need to check on my cattle, he said. You can rest here if you'd like. Nayland stood. I'd rather come with you. He hesitated, glancing at her side. Are you sure? She nodded. I don't like staying in one place too long. Elias saddled Willow, helping Nayland climb up again. He walked beside them as they moved across the land. The sun was higher now, warming the ground and turning the grass a brighter shade of green. As they traveled, Nayland spoke about her people, about how they moved with the seasons and followed the land's signs. She talked about the stories her elders told around the fire at night, stories of stars, rivers, and the spirits of the earth. Elias listened closely. He had lived near the forest for years, but he realized he had never truly known it the way she did. They reached the cattle, grazing calmly near a stream. Elias checked the fence and counted each animal. Naylin knelt by the water, touching the surface gently with her fingers. "This place is kind," she said, "if you know how to listen." Elias watched her, thoughtful. "I think I've been listening wrong all this time." She smiled at that just a little. On the way back, Elias began to cough. It was dry and rough, and he turned his face away, embarrassed. Naylin noticed immediately. "You've been sick," she said. He shrugged. "Just the cold air." "It comes and goes." She didn't look convinced. That evening, as the sun sank again behind the hills, Naylin stepped outside and gathered a small bundle of leaves and roots near the cabin. Elias watched from the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Something my grandmother taught me," she said, "for breathing and strength." Inside, she crushed the herbs carefully, mixing them into a warm drink. She handed it to him. Elias raised an eyebrow. "You sure this won't taste terrible?" She smiled. "It probably will." He laughed quietly and took a sip. He made a face and she laughed too. The sound filled the cabin, light and warm. That night they sat near the small fire, talking about their lives. Elias spoke about his wife, about the dreams they once had of building a bigger home and starting a family. His voice grew quiet as he spoke, but he did not stop himself this time. Naylin listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said softly, "The heart carries pain like the land carries scars, but both can still grow something new." Her words stayed with him long after the fire burned low. Over the next few days, Naylin's strength returned. She walked farther, explored the forest paths, and helped Elias with small tasks around the cabin. She showed him how to spot certain plants that could help with aches, tiredness, and small cuts. In return, Elias taught her how to ride Willow more confidently and how to track the movement of the cattle. They began to move together easily, like two people who had known each other longer than they truly had. One afternoon, dark clouds rolled in quickly and rain began to fall. They rushed back to the cabin, laughing as they got soaked. Inside, they hung their wet coats near the fire. As the rain tapped against the roof, Naylin stood by the window, watching the drops race down the glass. "I was supposed to meet my family near the Red Hills," she said quietly. "We were trading with another group. The storm came too fast. I lost the trail." Elias nodded. "We can look for them when the weather clears." She turned to him. "You would do that?" "Of course," he said. "No one should be alone out there." Her eyes softened. That night, Elias drank another cup of her herbal drink. His chest felt lighter, his breathing easier. He didn't say anything, but he noticed. As he lay in his bed, staring up at the ceiling, he realized something had changed. The quiet no longer felt heavy. It felt full. Outside, the forest stood under the rain, washing the land clean. Inside the small cabin, two lives that had once walked separate paths now rested under the same roof, unaware of how deeply their meeting was shaping what came next. And as Elias finally drifted into sleep, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Peace. The days that followed moved gently, like a slow river that did not rush but never truly stopped. The rain cleared, and the land around the cabin looked fresh and bright, as if the world had been given a new beginning. The grass shimmered with tiny drops of water in the morning light, and the forest smelled clean and alive. Elias woke earlier than usual. He stepped outside and stretched, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. For a moment he stood still, listening. Birds greeted the morning from the trees, and somewhere far away water flowed over rocks in a steady, peaceful rhythm. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Naylin stepped out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You're always awake before the sun," she said with a small smile. Elias shrugged. "Old habit." She walked beside him, looking out at the wide land. "My people say the morning is when the earth speaks the clearest. That's why it's good to listen then." Elias nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why I like it so much." They shared a quiet moment, standing side by side, watching the light slowly spread across the ground. After breakfast, Naylin asked if they could walk deeper into the forest. "There are places I want to show you," she said. "Things the land gives if you know where to look." Elias hesitated at first, but then nodded. He grabbed a small bag and his walking stick, and together they headed toward the tall trees. The forest welcomed them with soft shade and cool air. Sunlight filtered through the branches above, creating patterns on the ground. Naylin moved with ease, stepping around roots and rocks like she had known this path her whole life. She stopped near a small clearing where plants with wide green leaves grew close to the ground. She knelt and touched one gently. "This helps with tired muscles," she explained. "My grandmother used to make a warm paste from it after long journeys." Elias knelt beside her, watching carefully as she showed him how to tell the plant apart from others that looked similar. Farther along, she pointed out thin, tall stems with small yellow flowers. "This one helps when your chest feels tight," she said, glancing at him. "For breathing." Elias felt a strange mix of gratitude and surprise. He had lived near this forest for years, but he had never truly seen it the way she did. To him, it had always been a place to pass through. To her, it was something alive and giving. They filled their bag with a few small bundles and made their way back to the cabin. That afternoon, Elias worked on repairing a loose board on the fence. Nayland sat nearby, cleaning the herbs they had gathered. She laid them out carefully on a cloth, sorting them by shape and size. Every now and then, Elias would pause and look at her. He didn't quite understand why, but her presence made the space around him feel lighter, as if the air itself had changed. Later, when the sun was low, Nayland prepared another warm drink for him. Elias took it without question now. "Does it really help?" he asked. She smiled. "You tell me." He thought about it. His chest didn't feel as heavy as it used to. The tightness he had grown used to seem to fade more each day. "I think it does," he admitted. They sat on the steps of the cabin, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Elias spoke about the land, about how he learned to ride when he was young, about the first horse he ever owned. Nayland listened closely, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. It had been a long time since Elias had felt truly heard. As the stars began to appear, Nayland pointed up. "That one," she said. "We call it the Traveler's Light. My people believe it guides those who are lost." Elias followed her finger, looking at the small, bright star shining above them. "Maybe it led you here," he said quietly. She looked at him, thoughtful. Maybe it did. The next morning, Elias woke to the sound of soft coughing. He sat up quickly and looked toward Nayland. She stood near the table, holding a cup of water. "I'm fine," she said before he could speak. "Just the cold morning air." But he could see the concern in her eyes. Later that day, she asked him to rest while she worked around the cabin. Elias tried to argue, but she shook her head. "You help everyone else," she said. "Let someone help you for once." So he sat on the porch, watching her move about. She carried water, swept the floor, and even tried her hand at fixing a loose shutter. Elias smiled at her effort, even when it didn't go quite right. In the afternoon, a soft wind moved through the land. Nayland stood still for a moment, eyes closed, letting it brush against her face. "My family should be somewhere beyond the hills," she said quietly. "I can feel it. The land is telling me they are close." Elias felt a small ache in his chest at her words. He had known this moment would come. She had never planned to stay forever. "We'll look for them tomorrow," he said. That night they shared a simple meal. The fire crackled softly, filling the cabin with warmth and light. Shadows danced on the walls. Nayland spoke about her childhood, about running through open fields with her cousins, about learning songs from her mother and stories from her grandfather. Elias shared stories of his wife again, but this time his voice did not break. The memories still hurt, but they no longer felt as heavy. At one point, Nayland looked at him and said, "You don't talk about her like someone who is lost. You talk about her like someone who is still with you." Elias thought about that. "Maybe she is," he said. The next morning, they prepared for their journey. Elias saddled Willow and packed food and water. Nayland wrapped the herbs she had dried, placing them carefully in her bag. They rode toward the hills, following a narrow trail that cut through the land. The path was quiet, broken only by the sound of Willow's steps and the wind moving through tall grass. They searched for signs, for footprints, for any mark that showed people had passed through. Hours went by, and the sun climbed high in the sky. Just as Elias began to worry, Nayland stopped. She pointed to the ground. "Here," she said. "They were here." Elias leaned down and saw the faint marks in the dirt, the signs he had learned to look for when tracking cattle. But these were different. These told a story of people moving together, not alone. Nayland smiled, relief washing over her face. "They're close," she said. They followed the trail for a while longer until they reached a small rise. Below them, they could see smoke rising in the distance. Nayland's eyes filled with tears. "That's them." Elias felt a mix of happiness for her and a quiet sadness he couldn't quite name. They stopped at the edge of the hill. Nayland turned to him. "Thank you," she said, "for finding me, for helping me, for listening." Elias nodded. You helped me too, he said. She stepped closer and placed her hand over his chest just for a moment. You don't need the forest alone anymore, she said softly. Then she turned and walked toward her people. Elias stayed where he was, watching her figure grow smaller as she moved down the hill. The wind brushed past him, carrying the sounds of distant voices and laughter. He felt the land around him, wide and open, but no longer empty. As he turned Willow back toward home, Elias realized something deep inside him had changed. He had not just found someone in the forest. He had found a part of himself he thought was gone forever. The ride back to the cabin felt longer than usual. Elias guided Willow slowly across the open land, his eyes often drifting toward the distant hills where Nayland had disappeared from view. The wind moved through the grass in soft waves, but the sound did not bring him the same calm it once had. The land felt wide again, and the space beside him on the saddle felt heavier than it should. When he reached the cabin, the door creaked open just as it always had. The room inside looked the same, yet it did not feel the same. The small table, the chair by the fire, the window that caught the morning light, all of it seemed to hold the quiet memory of her presence. Elias set down his bag and sat on the edge of the bed. For a long moment he did nothing. He listened to the silence, but it no longer felt empty. It felt full of echoes, her laughter, her calm voice, the gentle way she moved through the space as if she belonged there. That night Elias tried to sleep, but rest did not come easily. He stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows move as the fire burned low. His chest felt strange, not tight like before, but open, as if something inside him was waiting instead of hurting. The next morning he woke to a soft mist rising from the ground outside. He stepped out of the cabin and breathed in the cool air. The forest stood quietly just as it always had, but now it felt like it was watching him. Elias went through his routine. He fed Willow. He checked the fence. He walked the edge of the land. But every task felt slower, as if his body moved while his mind stayed somewhere else. Later that day, he noticed the small bundle of herbs Nayland had left behind on the shelf. He picked it up and turned it in his hands. The leaves were dry now, but they still carried a faint, earthy scent. He made himself a warm drink, just like she had shown him. As he took a sip, he felt a quiet comfort settle in his chest. It reminded him that even though she was gone, something of her remained with him. Days passed. Elias found himself looking toward the hills more often than he cared to admit. Each morning, he half expected to see a small figure walking toward the cabin. Each evening, he sat on the steps, watching the sun sink behind the trees, wondering what she might be doing at that very moment. He kept busy. He repaired the roof. He cleared fallen branches from the path near the forest. He even started planting a small garden near the cabin, something he and his wife had once talked about but never done. As he worked, he thought about Nayland's words, about the land, about listening. He began to notice small things he had ignored before. The way the birds changed their calls when the weather was about to shift. The way the wind felt different before nightfall. The way the forest seemed to breathe. One afternoon, as he was tending to the garden, he saw a figure riding in the distance. His heart jumped. He stood up quickly, shading his eyes with his hand. The rider came closer, and for a moment he thought he might be imagining things. But as the figure grew clearer, he recognized the way the person sat tall in the saddle, the way the shawl moved with the wind. It was Nayland. Elias walked forward, not quite trusting his own eyes. When she reached the fence, she smiled. "I told you I would come back," she said. Elias felt a laugh rise in his chest, light and sudden. "You did," he replied. She dismounted and stepped toward him. She looked healthy, stronger than before. Her eyes shone with warmth. "My family wanted to thank you," she said. "They wanted me to bring you this." She handed him a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside were dried foods, carefully prepared, and a small carved piece of wood shaped like a bird. "It's a sign of safe journeys," she explained. Elias held it gently. "Tell them thank you," he said. They walked into the cabin together. The space felt full again, like it had been waiting for her. That evening they sat by the fire, sharing food and stories. Nayland spoke about her family, about the joy of finding them again, about the relief she had felt when she saw the smoke rising from their camp. Elias listened, truly happy for her, but beneath that happiness he felt something else. A quiet fear. He did not know how long she would stay this time. As the fire burned low, Nayland looked at him and said, "My family is moving again soon. The season is changing." Elias nodded even though the words settled heavily in his chest. "They always move," he said. "Yes," she replied, "that is our way." The next few days felt like borrowed time. Elias and Nayland walked the forest paths again. They gathered herbs. They rode Willow across the open land. They talked and laughed and shared quiet moments that felt too precious to rush. One morning, Nayland stood at the edge of the forest, looking back at the cabin. "This place is special," she said. "It holds strong memories." Elias followed her gaze. "It does now," he replied. That afternoon, dark clouds gathered in the sky. A storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain and loud thunder. They stayed inside, the fire crackling as the wind pushed against the walls of the cabin. The storm made the world outside feel far away. Inside, the small space felt warm and safe. Nayland sat close to the fire, watching the flames dance. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked. Elias thought for a moment. "I used to," he said. "But I thought this land was all I had left." She looked at him gently. "The land is not the only thing that holds you." Her words stayed with him. That night, as the storm faded and the rain softened, Elias realized something he had been avoiding. He did not just care about Nayland as someone he had helped. He cared about her as someone he did not want to lose. The next morning, the sky was clear and bright. The world looked washed and new. Nayland began to pack her things. Elias watched her, his hands resting on the table. He wanted to say something, but the words felt tangled inside him. She noticed his silence and walked over. "What is it?" she asked. Elias took a breath. "You don't have to leave right away," he said. "You could stay if you want." Nayland's expression softened, but her eyes held a quiet sadness. "My people need me," she said, "and I need them." Elias nodded. He had known this answer, but hearing it still hurt. He saddled Willow and helped Nayland mount. They rode together toward the edge of the land where the open fields met the forest. When they reached the place where their paths would split, they stopped. Nayland turned to him. "You gave me shelter when I needed it most," she said. "You listened when I spoke. You opened your heart when it was closed." Elias looked at her. "You gave me more than you know," he replied. She reached out and placed her hand over his chest again, just like before. "This is strong now," she said. "Don't let it grow quiet again." Elias swallowed. "I won't." They stood there for a moment, the wind moving softly around them, the land stretching out in every direction. Then Nayland leaned forward and rested her forehead gently against his, just for a second. "Safe journeys, Elias," she said. "Safe journeys, Nayland," he replied. She turned her horse and rode toward the forest, her figure slowly blending into the trees. Elias stayed where he was, watching until he could no longer see her. When he finally turned back toward his cabin, his steps felt different. The land was still wide. The sky was still open, but his heart was no longer alone. The days after Nayland left felt quiet, but not in the heavy way Elias once knew. This quiet was softer, like the calm after a long walk, when your body is tired but your heart feels light. He went back to his routines, but now each one carried a new sense of meaning. Every morning he stepped outside and looked toward the forest. The trees still stood tall and silent, but to Elias they no longer felt distant. They felt like old friends who had shared a secret with him. He fed Willow, checked the fence, and walked the edge of the land just as he always had. But now he noticed more. The way the sunlight touched the tops of the hills. The way small animals moved through the grass. The way the wind shifted when the weather was about to change. He kept working on the small garden he had started. The soil was dark and rich, and he planted seeds carefully, just as Nayland had shown him how to place herbs in the ground. He talked to the plants sometimes, even though he knew they could not answer. It made the space feel less empty. At night, Elias often sat on the steps of his cabin, looking up at the stars. He searched for the one Nayland had pointed out, the traveler's light. When he found it, he felt a quiet comfort, as if it was watching over both of them, no matter how far apart they were. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Elias noticed something in the distance. A small shape moved near the edge of the land. His heart skipped, but when the figure came closer, he saw it was a young boy from the nearby town, riding a thin horse. The boy waved as he approached. "Mr. Mercer," he called out. Elias walked forward. "What brings you out here?" The boy pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "A group passed through town today. They said to give you this." Elias took the paper carefully. His hands felt warm as he unfolded it. Inside was a simple message, written in careful letters. It said that Nayland and her family were moving north for the season. It thanked him again for his kindness. At the bottom was a small drawing of a bird like the one she had given him. Elias smiled, his chest filling with something gentle and steady. He looked up at the boy. "Thank you," he said. That night he placed the note beside the carved bird on the shelf. It felt like a small bridge between two worlds. Weeks passed. The land began to change. The air grew cooler in the mornings. The leaves at the edge of the forest started to turn soft shades of yellow and orange. Elias wrapped himself in a thicker coat and kept working, preparing the cabin for the coming cold. One afternoon, as he gathered firewood near the tree line, he heard a familiar sound. It was not a cry for help. It was the steady rhythm of hooves. He turned slowly. Nayland stood at the edge of the forest, riding a different horse this time, but sitting just as tall. The wind moved her shawl gently around her shoulders. Elias felt his breath catch in his chest. She smiled when she saw him. "I told you I would find my way back," she said. Elias walked toward her, hardly feeling his steps. "You did," he replied, his voice quiet but full. She dismounted, and they stood there for a moment, simply looking at each other. No words felt big enough to fill the space between them. "My family is setting camp near the river for the winter," Nayland said. "Not far from here." Elias nodded. "You're close, then?" "Yes," she said, "close enough to visit." They walked back to the cabin together. The door opened, and the familiar space welcomed them both. Elias made tea just like before, and they sat at the table, their hands wrapped around warm cups. They talked about everything and nothing, about the journey her family had taken, about the garden Elias had started, about the changing sky and the coming cold. Later, they walked outside as the sun began to set. The land glowed in soft light, and the forest stood calm and still. Nayland looked around. "This place feels different now," she said. Elias nodded. "So do I," she smiled at that. As the days went on, Nayland visited often. Sometimes she came alone. Sometimes she brought small gifts from her family, dried food, woven cloth, stories from the camp by the river. Elias, in return, helped her family when he could. He brought supplies from town. He helped repair a broken wagon. He showed the younger ones how to care for a horse. Slowly, their two worlds began to touch and blend, not in a way that changed either one, but in a way that made both stronger. One evening, as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, Elias and Nayland stood outside the cabin, watching the white flakes drift softly to the ground. "It's beautiful," Nayland said. Elias nodded. "It is." They stood close, not touching, but aware of each other's presence, like two paths that had finally learned how to run side by side. Nayland turned to him. "My people will move again when the snow melts," she said. "That is our way." Elias took a breath. "And this land is mine," he said. She looked at him gently. "But paths can cross more than once," he smiled. "I think I believe that now." That night, Elias lay in his bed, listening to the quiet sounds of winter settling in. He thought about the man he had been before he heard that faint cry in the forest. A man closed off, carrying loss like a heavy pack he could never set down. Now he felt lighter, not because the past had disappeared, but because something new had grown beside it. The weeks turned into months. Snow came and went. The land rested and then slowly woke again. The garden began to show small signs of life, green shoots pushing through the soil. One morning, Elias and Nayland walked the forest path together. Birds sang above them, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Nayland stopped near the small clearing where she had first shown him the healing plants. "Do you remember this place?" she asked. Elias smiled. "I don't think I could ever forget it." She knelt and touched the ground. "The land gives what it can when it can," she said, "but people give in different ways." Elias thought about that. "You gave me more than you know," he said. She stood and looked at him. "You gave me something too, a place where I was safe when I needed it most." They walked on, side by side, their steps slow and steady. As the forest opened back into the wide land, Elias felt something deep inside him settle into place. He no longer felt like a man standing alone at the edge of the world. He felt like someone who belonged not just to the land, but to the people who walked through it with him. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in soft colors, Elias sat on the steps of his cabin, Nayland beside him. Willow grazed nearby, calm and content. They watched the light fade together, the day closing gently around them. The forest stood tall, the land stretched wide, the sky opened above them. And in the quiet space between two hearts that had once walked separate paths, a new story continued to grow, steady and strong, carried forward by kindness, understanding, and a simple moment in the woods that had changed everything.